The loudest laugh in the arena became the greatest mistake an empire had ever made. I was standing only 30 feet from the imperial throne when it happened, close enough to hear every whisper before the entire galaxy erupted into laughter. My name is Commander Talonris, captain of the Imperial Honor Guard, and I had spent more than 20 years protecting emperors, ambassadors, and champions from every known civilization. I believed I had already seen every impossible surprise the galaxy could produce. Then a human soldier calmly destroyed everything I thought I understood about victory. The Grand Convergence Arena stretched nearly 2 miles beneath a shimmering crystal dome, surrounded by more than 100,000 spectators and broadcast to billions across imperial space. The greatest warriors from hundreds of civilizations had competed for weeks, and only one remained undefeated. Mason Carter. The human stood alone in the center of the enormous platform, wearing a simple white combat uniform marked by dust and tournament insignias. He carried no ceremonial decorations, no extravagant armor, and no expression of pride. He simply waited while the emperor rose from the crystal throne. Ancient tradition granted every tournament champion one reward chosen from the treasures of the empire. Entire fleets had been claimed through this ceremony. Noble houses had exchanged planets for this honor. Even royal titles had changed hands because of victories earned inside this arena. The emperor extended one hand toward the countless rewards displayed across the platform. Rare energy crystals shimmered beneath golden lights. Legendary weapons rested inside transparent cases. Ownership documents for prosperous star systems floated above elegant pedestals. Every treasure imaginable stood waiting for the champion's decision. Mason barely looked at them. His eyes quietly moved beyond the priceless artifacts, beyond the military honors, beyond the influential nobles gathered beside the throne. They stopped on someone almost everyone else ignored. Princess Saris Vera stood several steps behind the other royal heirs, separated more by reputation than distance. While her sisters accepted compliments from senators and ambassadors, Saris remained silent, her silver-blue skin reflecting the palace lights as though she hoped no one would notice she was there at all. Throughout the empire, she had become known as the Forgotten Princess. Noble families avoided political alliances with her. Military commanders dismissed her opinions before she spoke. Even many palace servants believed her future had already disappeared long before she reached adulthood. Mason calmly raised his hand. I choose the princess. Silence swallowed the arena. For one perfect heartbeat, not a single voice could be heard. Then laughter crashed through the stadium like a tidal wave. Alien nobles laughed openly. Wealthy merchants applauded sarcastically. Several foreign champions shook their heads in disbelief. One senator stood and shouted loudly enough for half the arena to hear. The human crossed the galaxy to win the least valuable prize in the empire. More laughter followed. Princess Saris lowered her eyes without responding. She had clearly heard those words countless times before. Mason never reacted. His breathing remained steady. His expression never changed. The emperor studied the human carefully before asking one final time. Champion, you understand that this choice cannot be reversed. Mason nodded once. That is exactly why I made it. Before the emperor could continue, the ceremonial floor shifted beneath everyone's feet. Ancient rings of blue light surrounded the arena as armored alien challengers stepped onto the platform according to imperial law. Their leader respectfully bowed toward the throne before turning to face the human. Every champion may be challenged before claiming an imperial reward, he announced. If your judgment is truly worthy of the empire, prove it. The crowd erupted once more, convinced the human had finally made the first mistake of his remarkable career. Mason quietly looked at each challenger before smiling almost imperceptibly. Standing only a few yards away, I suddenly realized something the cheering audience had completely missed. The human did not look surprised. He looked as though this was exactly the moment he had been expecting all along. The laughter had not completely faded before the ceremonial challenge officially began. The ancient rings of blue light surrounding the arena expanded until they formed a perfect circle nearly 100 yards across. Every challenger stepped into position with disciplined precision, while imperial judges floated above the platform inside transparent observation chambers. Princess Saris Vera remained beside the throne, her hands folded calmly, even though every insult thrown toward her echoed throughout the stadium. Mason Carter simply adjusted the cuffs of his uniform and walked toward the center of the circle as if he were arriving for an ordinary conversation instead of another public trial. Commander Varric, leader of the challengers, saluted the Emperor before addressing the human. Imperial tradition requires that every champion who claims a royal prize must demonstrate judgment equal to strength. We will not test your power. We will test your decision. The audience immediately approved. Most believed this challenge would expose the greatest weakness in the human's strange choice. The judges activated the arena. Countless holographic pathways appeared beneath everyone's feet, creating an intricate tactical field filled with shifting platforms, elevated bridges, and glowing markers. The first objective appeared above the arena for the entire galaxy to see. Reach the central platform while maintaining complete control of your assigned territory. Commander Varric smiled confidently. Every challenger immediately separated into carefully organized formations, blocking every direct route toward the objective. Military analysts began predicting the outcome before the challenge had truly started. Nearly every projection favored the alien formation. Mason did not move. Instead, he quietly studied the shifting pathways beneath the challengers. 5 long seconds passed. Then 10. Nervous whispers spread through the audience. One senator laughed again. The human cannot even decide where to begin. Princess Saris never looked away from Mason. Somehow she appeared less worried than anyone else in the arena. Finally, Mason took a single step, not toward the center, away from it. More laughter erupted. Several commentators openly questioned whether exhaustion had finally overcome the undefeated champion. Commander Varric confidently ordered his formation forward, believing the human had surrendered the shortest route. That was exactly what Mason wanted. As the alien formation advanced together, 2 moving platforms automatically locked into place behind them. The tactical system instantly recognized their own movement had restricted their future options. Bright amber indicators appeared beside every challenger. Mobility reduced. Commander Varric frowned for the first time. Mason calmly continued walking, never rushing, allowing the arena itself to create a new path directly toward the objective. He had never competed against the challengers. He had competed against the rules governing the arena. The realization spread across the judges almost simultaneously. One elderly strategist leaned toward another and quietly whispered. He read the system before he read his opponents. Commander Varric quickly attempted to reorganize his team, but every correction forced another adjustment somewhere else. Their disciplined formation slowly became their greatest limitation. Mason reached the final platform with smooth, deliberate steps while the challengers remained trapped behind their own tactical decisions. The arena flashed brilliant blue. Objective complete. Maximum efficiency awarded to the human. The laughter disappeared instantly. Tens of thousands of spectators stared in complete silence. Even foreign commanders exchanged uncertain glances because none of them had expected victory to arrive without overwhelming force. Commander Varric slowly approached Mason after the judges confirmed the result. You knew exactly where we would move. Mason smiled politely. No, I knew exactly where you believed I would move. Princess Saris lifted her head ever so slightly. For the first time since entering the arena, she saw members of the royal court looking at the human with curiosity instead of amusement. Standing beside the emperor, I realized the challenge had never been about proving whether the princess was worthy. It was becoming proof that the human understood the empire better than the empire understood itself. Silence settled over the grand convergence arena in a way I had never witnessed before. Moments earlier, the crowd had laughed at the human. Now more than 100,000 spectators watched Mason Carter with cautious respect because he had defeated the Empire's finest tactical formation without overpowering a single opponent. Commander Varric stepped aside as Imperial attendants reset the arena for the next examination. Princess Saris Vera remained where she stood near the crystal throne, but something had changed. She no longer kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Instead, she watched the human with quiet curiosity, as though trying to understand why someone capable of claiming unimaginable wealth had willingly chosen the one princess everyone else ignored. The emperor slowly rose and raised the ancient scepter of accord. The first challenge has been completed. His voice echoed throughout the arena. The second trial will determine whether the champion possesses the judgment required to recognize true leadership. At those words, several members of the royal court exchanged knowing smiles. Many believed this challenge had been designed specifically to expose Mason's greatest mistake. The arena transformed once again. Crystal pillars emerged from beneath the platform, each displaying holographic records of the empire's royal heirs. Military achievements, diplomatic successes, economic reforms, scientific discoveries, and public approval ratings floated above every prince and princess. Princess Sarah stood at the end of the line with almost every category marked lower than the others. A wave of quiet whispers spread through the audience. The display appeared to confirm everything the empire had believed for years. The chief royal advisor addressed the human. Champion, explain your decision. Every measurable record suggests that another royal heir would strengthen the empire more than Princess Sarah's. What did you see that every advisor, general, and senator failed to see? Every camera focused on Mason. Every spectator leaned forward. Even the challengers who had faced him moments earlier waited for his answer. Mason looked at the floating records only briefly before turning toward Princess Sarah. May I ask her one question instead? The emperor nodded. Mason faced the princess with calm respect. If you became ruler tomorrow, what would be the first order you would give? Princess Sarah appeared surprised. She glanced toward the emperor, who encouraged her with a slight nod. After a thoughtful pause, she answered softly. I would spend 1 year visiting every frontier colony before making a single new law. Leaders should understand the people they serve before expecting those people to understand them. The arena became completely still. Mason smiled. That is why I chose her. Confused murmurs immediately filled the stadium. One influential senator stood and objected. That answer proves nothing. Mason turned toward him without raising his voice. It proves everything. Every other record measures what the princess has already been allowed to accomplish. Her answer reveals what she intends to become once someone finally gives her the opportunity. The chief royal advisor immediately reopened the historical archive. Curious, he searched the recorded speeches of previous emperors. Several long moments passed before his expression changed completely. He slowly looked toward the throne in disbelief. Your Majesty, he whispered. The founding empress gave almost the exact same answer before her coronation. Audible gasps echoed across the arena. Historians hurriedly verified the ancient transcript. The words matched almost perfectly. For decades, the empire had measured titles, victories, and popularity, yet its greatest ruler had once spoken with the same quiet humility as the forgotten princess standing before them now. Commander Varric lowered his head respectfully toward Mason. You did not choose the weakest heir, he admitted. You chose the one everyone else forgot to understand. Standing beside the Imperial Guard, I watched doubt slowly disappear from countless alien faces. For the first time since the ceremony began, the crowd was no longer asking why the human had chosen the forgotten princess. They were beginning to ask themselves why none of them had chosen her first. The mood inside the Grand Convergence Arena had changed so completely that even the echoes sounded different. Only minutes earlier the crowd had laughed at Mason Carter for choosing the forgotten princess. Now every conversation carried the same uneasy question. What else had the human already seen that the rest of the empire had missed? Princess Sarah Vera stood beside the crystal throne with a confidence that had not been there before. She still spoke little, but she no longer looked invisible. The emperor slowly raised his hand, and the arena fell silent once again. The final ceremonial examination will now begin, he declared. If the champion succeeds, no voice within the empire may challenge his judgment again. Massive sections of the arena floor shifted apart, revealing a second platform suspended above a shimmering energy field nearly 50 feet below. 12 Imperial Guardians entered the arena wearing identical ceremonial armor polished to a mirror finish. They were not chosen because they were the strongest warriors. They were chosen because they represented every military academy across the empire. Their commander stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Champion, this examination measures leadership under pressure. The objective is simple. Guide your chosen companion across the arena while our formation prevents your advance. Every participant must obey imperial law. No unnecessary force. No reckless actions. Victory belongs to the leader who reaches the final gate while preserving order. The spectators immediately favored the Guardians. Their disciplined formation stretched across the entire platform with almost no visible opening. Military analysts projected less than a 3% probability that any individual could cross without violating the ceremonial rules. Mason quietly looked toward Princess Saris. "Walk beside me," he said calmly. "Do not watch them. Watch me." She nodded without hesitation. The challenge began. The Guardians advanced with remarkable coordination, slowly narrowing every possible route toward the opposite gate. Several senators smiled confidently, believing the human had finally encountered a problem without an answer. Mason never accelerated. Every step remained measured and deliberate. Instead of forcing his way through the formation, he adjusted his pace until the Guardians themselves began compensating for his movement. Their disciplined reactions slowly created tiny gaps between individual positions. They were almost impossible to notice from the audience, but Mason recognized every one of them. He gently guided Princess Saris toward the first opening before it disappeared. The crowd gasped. One Guardian immediately shifted to close the space, unintentionally creating another gap farther ahead. Mason changed direction without warning. Again, the formation reacted. Again, another opening appeared. The Guardians remained perfectly disciplined, yet every attempt to contain the human gradually produced the path he needed. Commander Talonris, standing beside the Emperor, quietly smiled. "I finally understood what separated the human from every commander I had ever served. He never fought against discipline. He allowed discipline to reveal its own predictable rhythm." Princess Saris followed beside him with growing confidence, matching every movement without hesitation. They crossed half the platform while the Guardians realized too late that they were no longer controlling the challenge. They were responding to it. The final barrier closed directly in front of the ceremonial gate. Every spectator expected Mason to stop. Instead, he calmly turned toward Princess Saris. "Your turn." She studied the formation only for a brief moment before taking 3 careful steps exactly where Mason had been looking. The lead Guardian instinctively moved aside to avoid breaking ceremonial spacing. The gate opened automatically. Brilliant blue light filled the arena as the judges announced the result. Challenge completed. Maximum leadership score awarded. Thunderous applause erupted from every section of the stadium. The 12 Guardians immediately stepped back before bowing together toward both the human and the princess. The Emperor slowly rose from the crystal throne, his expression filled not with surprise, but with admiration. Looking across the arena, I realized the greatest victory had not been that the human reached the gate. It was that he had quietly taught the forgotten princess to lead an entire empire before anyone else even realized the lesson had begun. The applause inside the Grand Convergence Arena continued long after the imperial judges declared the ceremonial trials complete, yet the loudest voices in the empire had suddenly become the quietest. Senators who had mocked the human now avoided meeting his eyes. Military commanders who had expected him to fail carefully reviewed every decision he had made, searching for the hidden logic that had defeated each challenge without unnecessary force. Princess Saris Vera stood beside the Emperor with a calm confidence that seemed impossible only an hour earlier. Then the celebration unexpectedly stopped. A deep metallic tone echoed through the palace as ancient mechanisms hidden beneath the crystal throne awakened for the first time in countless generations. Every historian present immediately looked toward the center of the arena. Massive rings of white crystal slowly rose from beneath the platform, surrounding the throne with brilliant streams of golden light. The chief royal archivist stared at the symbols appearing across the floating rings before speaking in complete disbelief. "The Founder Archive has activated." Confused whispers spread across the audience. Many scholars believe the legendary archive had become permanently inactive thousands of years earlier. According to imperial history, it responded only when a forgotten succession condition had been fulfilled. The Emperor himself appeared genuinely surprised. "No living ruler has ever witnessed this ceremony," he admitted quietly. Princess Saris looked toward the glowing structure with uncertainty. Why would it respond now? Before anyone could answer, the ancient archive projected thousands of shimmering records into the air above the arena. Images of every previous emperor and empress appeared one after another, stretching back to the earliest days of the empire. Then every image disappeared except one. The first empress. Her recorded message filled the silent arena. The future of this empire will not be secured by the heir loved most by the crowd. It will belong to the heir recognized first by the one who judges character above reputation. Every spectator remained completely still. The archive continued. When the forgotten heir is chosen freely by the greatest outsider, open the founder record. A hidden chamber slowly emerged beneath the crystal throne. Resting inside was an elegant crystal tablet covered with ancient imperial symbols. The chief archivist carefully translated the inscription before his voice began to tremble. The founding laws never declared that succession belonged to the most celebrated royal child. They declared that succession belonged to the heir first recognized by wisdom before popularity. Audible gasps spread throughout the arena. Noble families immediately began reviewing centuries of accepted tradition. Everything they believed about the royal succession had been built upon incomplete records. Mason Carter quietly walked toward the crystal tablet, but stopped several feet away. He never reached for it. Instead, he looked toward Princess Saris. "This belongs to you." She hesitated. "Everyone else deserves it more." Mason smiled gently. "That is exactly why everyone else overlooked you." Encouraged by his words, Princess Saris slowly placed one hand upon the ancient tablet. Instantly, the arena filled with brilliant golden light. Every crystal surrounding the throne illuminated at once, and the Founder Archive officially confirmed her recognition before the entire empire. Commander Varric removed his ceremonial insignia and respectfully bowed. One by one, the Imperial Guardians followed. Senators stood. Admirals stood. Even foreign ambassadors honored the moment in complete silence. Nobody had been ordered to do so. They simply understood history had changed in front of them. Standing beside the Imperial Honor Guard, I realized the human had never entered the tournament searching for treasure, titles, or influence. He had crossed the stars because he recognized extraordinary worth hidden beneath years of quiet rejection. The greatest victory in the arena had never belonged to the champion alone. It belonged to the forgotten princess whom only one human had been wise enough to see before an entire galaxy finally opened its eyes. The Founder Archive remained illuminated long after the ceremony ended, its golden light reflecting across every crystal tower of the Imperial Palace. Throughout the capital, news spread faster than any official announcement. The forgotten princess had been recognized by the oldest law in the empire, and the human champion had become the first outsider in recorded history to awaken the ancient succession protocol. Yet not everyone welcomed the revelation. Before sunrise, the Imperial War Council requested an emergency session inside the Hall of Command. Every senior fleet commander, every decorated general, and every strategic advisor gathered around a circular holographic table nearly 60 feet across. At the center stood General Kaler Threx, the most respected military commander in the Empire and a hero whose campaigns had protected dozens of frontier systems. He bowed respectfully to the Emperor before speaking. "Your Majesty, I do not question the Founder Archive, but leadership requires more than wisdom. The future ruler must also understand command under impossible pressure. I request one final strategic examination before the Empire accepts this decision without question." No anger filled his voice, only duty. The Emperor slowly turned toward Mason Carter. "Champion, Imperial law no longer requires you to accept another challenge." Mason answered almost immediately. "If this gives the Empire confidence in its future, I will gladly participate." Princess Saris quietly looked toward him. "You have already proven enough." Mason smiled gently. "Sometimes the last doubt is the hardest one to remove." Within the hour, the Hall of Command transformed into the largest tactical simulator ever constructed by the Empire. A living holographic battlefield nearly 3 miles wide appeared above the command floor, displaying mountain ranges, orbital stations, civilian colonies, supply routes, and countless moving fleet markers. Every participant received identical resources and identical objectives. Protect the civilian sectors while securing the central gateway before the opposing commander. General Kaler immediately demonstrated why he had earned legendary status. His fleets advanced with extraordinary precision, controlling every major approach while maintaining flawless defensive formations. Admirals throughout the chamber quietly nodded with admiration. Mason studied the display without issuing a single order for several moments. One senator whispered confidently, "The human has finally met someone he cannot outthink." Princess Saris continued watching Mason instead of the battlefield. She had learned that his silence usually meant he was discovering something everyone else had overlooked. Finally, Mason began moving his fleet markers. To everyone's surprise, he deliberately redirected several ships away from the central gateway and toward isolated civilian settlements. Confused voices spread through the chamber. Some advisors believed he had abandoned the primary objective. General Kaler immediately advanced to seize the opening. Then the simulation revealed its hidden condition. Thousands of civilian evacuation vessels automatically entered the battlefield, crossing directly through the general's planned advance. Imperial safety regulations required military formations to reduce speed whenever civilian traffic occupied strategic corridors. General Kaler's perfectly organized assault slowed dramatically. Mason had anticipated the hidden variable before it appeared. His repositioned fleet had already established protected evacuation lanes, allowing civilian traffic and military operations to continue without delay. His forces reached the gateway first while preserving every civilian route. Brilliant blue light flooded the command chamber. Maximum strategic score awarded. Maximum civilian protection achieved. Silence settled across the room. General Kaler carefully reviewed every movement recorded by the simulation before approaching the human. He removed the command medallion from his ceremonial uniform and respectfully offered it forward. Mason gently closed the general's hand around it. "Keep it," he said with quiet respect. "The Empire still needs commanders who place their people first." General Kaler smiled for the first time that day. "And today," he replied, "the Empire learned that the strongest commander is not the one who reaches victory the fastest, but the one who never forgets who the victory is meant to protect." Standing beside the Emperor, I realized the final challenge had ended exactly like every challenge before it. The human had not defeated the Empire by proving its greatest heroes were wrong. He had shown them an even better way to become the heroes they already wanted to be. General Kaler Threx publicly acknowledging Mason Carter changed something far more important than the outcome of another challenge. For the first time in living memory, the Empire stopped debating whether the human deserved respect and began asking what else he might understand that everyone else had overlooked. Princess Saris Vera noticed the difference immediately as palace officials who had ignored her for years now greeted her with genuine courtesy. Yet Mason seemed almost unaffected by the growing admiration surrounding him. He continued walking the palace corridors with the same calm expression that had carried him through every trial. 3 days later, the Emperor convened the Assembly of Houses, the highest political gathering in the Empire. Representatives from more than 400 inhabited systems filled the celestial forum beneath a magnificent dome nearly 1,000 feet wide. Every noble family, military governor, scientific council, and frontier delegation occupied their assigned places. According to ancient custom, the recognized royal successor would address the entire empire for the first time. Princess Saris slowly stepped onto the central platform while complete silence settled across the chamber. Before she could begin speaking, Lord Zirin Voles, leader of one of the oldest noble dynasties, respectfully raised his ceremonial staff. "Your Majesty," he announced, "the Founder Archive may recognize the princess, but recognition is not the same as confidence. The frontier worlds deserve proof that she can unite those who never believed in her." Several influential delegates quietly nodded. The challenge was political rather than military, yet the tension became every bit as intense as the contests inside the arena. Princess Saris remained composed, prepared to answer for herself, but Mason gently spoke first. "May I offer a different test?" The Emperor looked toward him with curiosity. "Proceed." Mason faced the assembled delegates. "Instead of asking whether the princess can convince the Empire, ask whether the Empire has ever truly listened to her." Quiet murmurs spread through the enormous chamber. Mason continued, "Give every delegation one opportunity to ask the princess any question they believe matters most. No advisors, no prepared speeches, only honest answers." The Emperor immediately accepted the proposal. One by one, the delegates stepped forward. Frontier governors asked about isolated colonies. Scientists questioned long-term exploration. Merchants discussed economic stability. Military commanders spoke about protecting distant trade routes. Princess Saris answered every question without hesitation. She remembered the names of remote systems many senators had forgotten. She quoted agricultural reports from neglected colonies. She explained how frontier families often solved problems years before central governments noticed them. The chamber gradually became quieter after every answer. Delegates who had expected uncertainty instead found remarkable preparation, compassion, and practical understanding. Lord Zirin himself finally stepped forward with the last question. Princess, after everything that has happened, what is the first change you would make as future ruler? Saris smiled gently before answering. I would require every future member of the Imperial Council to spend 1 month each year living on a frontier world without royal privileges, because leaders should experience the lives they hope to improve. Complete silence followed. Then applause began from the frontier representatives. Military governors joined them. Scientists stood. Merchants followed. Within moments, the entire celestial forum echoed with unanimous approval. Lord Zirin slowly approached the princess before lowering his head. Respectfully, Your Highness, he said quietly. Today I realized that the Empire never lacked a worthy leader. We lacked the wisdom to recognize one. Looking across the chamber, I realized Mason had once again defeated every challenge without taking center stage. He never answered the questions for the princess. He simply created the opportunity for the entire empire to discover what had been standing quietly before them all along. And that victory changed more hearts than any battlefield triumph ever could. Only after an empire finally learned to trust its future did the galaxy reveal an even greater mystery. Less than 48 hours after the assembly of houses ended, every long-range observatory in Imperial space detected the same impossible signal. It did not originate from a neighboring civilization, an unexplored star system, or a hidden military installation. It came from an ancient navigation corridor that had disappeared from every known map thousands of years earlier. Inside the Hall of Celestial Records, historians, admirals, and scientists gathered around a massive holographic projection showing a chain of forgotten stars stretching far beyond the Empire's current borders. Princess Saris Vera held the Founder Seal while its crystal surface glowed brighter than ever before. One ancient symbol continued pulsing at the edge of the map. The chief archivist carefully translated the newly awakened inscription. The first bridge awaits the rightful guardian. Confused voices filled the chamber. No living scholar had ever encountered those words. The Emperor turned toward Mason Carter. You have seen patterns none of us recognized. What do you think this means? Mason quietly studied the projection before answering. The founders did not build an empire that ended here. They built one that expected future generations to keep reaching outward. Princess Saris looked at the unfinished route crossing the stars. You believe someone is still waiting? Mason nodded. Not someone expecting an invasion. Someone expecting a promise to be kept. Within hours, a small diplomatic expedition departed the capital. Unlike the enormous battle fleets admired. Throughout the Empire, this mission carried only scientists, translators, historians, engineers, and a modest defensive escort. Several admirals privately admitted they would have sent hundreds of warships only weeks earlier. Now they trusted a different approach because the human had repeatedly shown that understanding often reached farther than intimidation. After traveling through the restored navigation corridor, the expedition emerged into a breathtaking region of space unlike anything recorded in modern history. Enormous luminous rings surrounded a peaceful blue world while elegant orbital structures reflected sunlight like floating crystal oceans. No defensive fleets rushed to intercept them. No warning broadcasts demanded surrender. Instead, a single welcoming transmission reached the flagship. To those who remember the first promise, you are welcome. Every officer on the bridge stood in astonishment. Princess Saris slowly looked toward Mason. They knew someone would return. A graceful vessel approached the expedition without escorts. Its representatives stepped aboard carrying ceremonial emblems remarkably similar to the Founder Seal. Their leader respectfully bowed before the princess. For countless generations, we preserved the first covenant between our peoples, the visitor explained. We feared the Empire had forgotten it forever. Princess Saris gently raised the founder seal. We almost did. The representative smiled warmly. Then history chose wisely. He turned toward Mason with quiet curiosity. Our oldest records also mention your world. Mason blinked in surprise. Humanity. The visitor activated an ancient crystal archive. A message from the earliest days of the Alliance appeared before everyone. When the day arrives that pride blinds great civilizations, trust the humans who still recognize value where others see none. Complete silence filled the bridge. Even the emperor lowered his head respectfully after reading the inscription. The ancient founders had predicted that one day an outsider would restore what powerful rulers had forgotten. As the first diplomatic meeting continued, discoveries replaced suspicion, cooperation, replaced uncertainty, and two civilizations separated by centuries finally fulfilled a promise their ancestors had made long ago. Standing beside the observation window, I watched humans and aliens exchange knowledge beneath unfamiliar stars without fear or arrogance. At that moment, I realized the greatest strength the human had ever demonstrated was never his intelligence, his courage, or even his victories. It was his unwavering belief that every forgotten person, every forgotten promise, and every forgotten opportunity deserved to be seen before the rest of the galaxy learned how to see them for themselves. The return journey to the imperial capital felt different from every voyage that had come before it. The expedition had not conquered new territory, claimed valuable resources, or defeated a powerful enemy. Instead, it returned carrying something the Empire had almost forgotten how to value: trust. As the flagship entered the capital system, thousands of civilian vessels gathered peacefully around the ceremonial approach corridor. Their lights stretched across space like rivers of stars welcoming the explorers home. Princess Saris Vera stood beside the observation window holding the founder's seal, but she no longer looked like the overlooked royal daughter who had once stood silently behind her sisters. She carried herself with quiet confidence earned through wisdom rather than applause. Mason Carter remained beside her exactly as he always had, calm, observant, and completely uninterested in the admiration spreading throughout the galaxy. When the expedition landed, the Emperor invited every delegation into the Grand Convergence Arena where the story had first begun. More than 100,000 spectators filled the enormous stadium once again. This time no one laughed when the human entered. Every person stood before he reached the center of the platform. The Emperor slowly raised his hand for silence. Today, he announced, the Empire celebrates not a conquest, but a promise fulfilled. Thunderous applause echoed beneath the crystal dome before gradually fading into respectful quiet. The Emperor then turned toward Mason. Champion, history will remember your victories. Tell us what reward you wish to receive. Every noble expected the human to ask for land, command, or everlasting honor. Mason smiled gently before answering. I already received it. Curious whispers spread across the arena. The Emperor tilted his head slightly. Explain. Mason looked toward Princess Saris before speaking to the entire Empire. I came here believing strength alone changed history. I was wrong. History changes the moment someone chooses to believe in the person everyone else has already dismissed. Complete silence followed his words. Princess Saris stepped beside him. The Empire believed the human rescued me, she said softly. The truth is that he rescued our ability to recognize one another. Even the oldest senators lowered their heads thoughtfully. Commander Varric smiled. General Kaler nodded with quiet respect. Lord Zirin placed one hand over his heart. Every person who had once questioned the human now understood the lesson they had spent so long resisting. The Emperor slowly removed the ancient imperial medallion from around his neck. It had been worn by every ruler for countless generations. Rather than placing it around Mason's neck, he held it high for everyone to see. This symbol will remain with the throne, he declared. But beginning today, every future ruler will study the example of the human who reminded an empire that wisdom begins where pride ends. The arena erupted into applause unlike anything I had ever witnessed during my years of service. It was not the celebration of a warrior who had defeated stronger opponents. It was the gratitude of an entire civilization that had rediscovered its own forgotten purpose. As the ceremony concluded, The first diplomatic vessels from the newly reunited civilization entered imperial space, welcomed not by warships, but by ambassadors, scholars, and explorers. Children from dozens of worlds waved together from the viewing galleries while humans and aliens stood side by side, without suspicion. Watching them beneath the brilliant lights of the arena, I finally understood why the human had seemed so calm from the very beginning. He never arrived to prove that humanity was greater than the galaxy. He arrived to prove that true greatness begins when someone sees value where everyone else sees failure. The Forgotten Princess became the leader her people had always needed because one human refused to follow the crowd. And from that single choice, an empire remembered its past, discovered its future, and taught the stars that the strongest civilizations are not built by those who seek the greatest prize, but by those wise enough to recognize it before anyone else ever can.